Top 10 cards to pick up for really early November / December / early 2023. Make sure you guys smash the crap out of that subscribe button so you guys don't miss out on more awesome content. Number one on the list here is going to be Book of Lunar Eclipse and Total Lunar Eclipse, actually. So basically, the OCG has started using these as side deck options to flip down these massive Chatri Law boards. Now, it's not to say that Chatri Law can't just blank out your spell and trap card zones for you to do your thing, but if your opponent does that, then your monsters can actually combo, which is what you want. So you've got a decision tree that you need to make while playing that deck, and it is, do I go for the spells and traps to prevent the outs of that, or do we, blank the monster zones and then lose to the Book of Total Lunar Eclipse, or, Book of Eclipse flipping down our Xyz? It's definitely something interesting. I'm already seeing, movements on the market for these two particular cards, but this is a little bit of a nod going, hey, make sure you have these picked up just in case these end up being something that you end up wanting to have just in case, this comes to pass. Next up is going to be Lava Golem. Now, I guess we'll put Sphere Mode here as well. Basically, cards that act in a detour to clean up huge amounts of monsters on the field. Now, to be honest with you, Lava Golem is going to be a little bit easier one to summon because it's 2 monsters versus Sphere Mode's 3. But the big thing with this is they're just monster or summoning conditions that end up clearing up these monsters that end up being massive annoyances that you can't out via other cards. Or, your opponent's got like 3 negates up on the field, you hand them a Sphere Mode, congratulations, one card handled 3 of these devastating effects that you basically would have had to deal with. All right, and that's basically what we're starting to see here is an inclusion or a giant pickup of these cards that can out these particularly annoying monsters. These do tend to go in trends. I'm sure they'll rotate out eventually and then come back. So next up is going to be Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries. So as you're heading into the Shizu format here, you might see a whole lot more Ghost Reaper because going after a Kitagalos is pretty devastating to the tier deck. Tier can still function. It's way harder, actually. If you Ghost Reaper correctly in that matchup, which is the Kitagalos, they have a very, very hard time. Now, there are ways around the Ghost Reaper in Winter Cherries. We've seen it plenty of times here. But if you can actually pull it off and do it correctly, it will be a very, very devastating resolution for you. So with all these coming around, I just wanted to say that there's probably going to be a little bit more of a want for these particular cards just because of how good that they're going to be going forward. It's almost like hitting specific extra deck cards and more devastating formats ends up being, traditionally the way to go. Next up is going to be Triple Tactics Talents. So we've seen Talents up on pre-sale, $9, $10, and now with the new Tactics card coming out where you can just search for the Triple Tactics Talent, congratulations, you have it. Honestly, this is more so a nod to the new card coming out than the previous one, but the thing is the previous one has the interaction to be searched off of the new one, and then you get your 3 devastating effects off of that. So that's kind of where your value tree comes in here, is just the fact that you can now search for talents, which means you technically need less talents. Though traditionally, I think most talents that we've seen main decked have been 2 to 3. Well, actually, I haven't seen a lot of 3s in a while. It's mainly been 2s for quite some time. So a little bit of a nod here. Make sure you have a talents or 2 laying around for the new one coming out here, just as an option tree for you to have, because now that prices have been pretty much slashed in half, it's so much easier to do. Next up is going to be Dimensional Fissure. Now, once again, we know how players love their max rarity cards. We have supers sitting out there, and they're going to continue to go up. Chatri Law loves this card, man. Honestly, this is like one of the, besides like their own walking, talking macrocosmo, the fact that they can just go, oh, we can play Dimension Shifter, we can play Dimensional Fissure. Our whole game plan in this stupid deck is to set up this this game state that just inverts. Like, it's meant to be the counter to tier elements. All right, it's almost like we haven't had a walking, talking macrocosmo deck in quite some time. So I will say it is pretty interesting to see you know, how this deck is kind of shaped up to be that anti-meta pick, and that there are still plenty of cards that you can pick up to kind of get your foot in the door here. So don't underestimate the power of max rarity good stuff, because it usually ends up doing well. Next up is going to be Dagger for Hire. Now this one's a little bit more specific. So, or Donner Dagger for Hire. It's 2 monsters with different types to make it. You can target 1 monster for hire you control and 1 monster your opponent controls and destroy them. Now you're probably like, oh, okay, and then you contribute a monster for hire from your hand or graveyard with different name the tribute monster. If you do tributing monster, you can summon 1 more such monster from your hand. Well, the main thing we care about here is the first effect. You target 1 for hire, which is this card, and then 1 card your opponent controls and destroy them. I've seen a lot of this card starting to show up in a lot of extra decks in Japan, which means you're going to want to make sure you have a copy of this, because the application for this card is starting to kind of take off a little bit, and it's super rare. It's not like it's going to cost you a crazy large amount of money to pick up 1 copy of this for whatever might come along your way to want to play this. Next up is going to be your BYSTIAL core. And by BYSTIAL core, I'm going to mainly be focusing on MAGNAMHUT and Druisworm for this. Now, traditionally, you can pick up your Lubellions, your Saronniers, your Branded Regains, and things like that, but I don't think that you need to go that ham, at least right now, unless you're planning to go on with future, you know, applications. I think, honestly, 3 MAGNAMHUT, 1 Druisworm, or 2 Druisworm will be where you kind of want to sit right now. Obviously, some builds are playing 2 MAGNAMHUT, 1 Druisworm. It's really going to come down to what you want to do. And I know that saying that these cards are something that you want to have becomes, MAGNAMHUTs are very, very expensive just for a super rare out of the pack. But to be honest with you, these particular cards and the interruption power that they bring are very, very free, and they are very, very splashable at that. So that's definitely something that you want, is good splashable cards that won't really take away from your deck strategy, and putting a free level 6 on the field is pretty good. Next up is going to be your Chatri Law cards. Now, you have Fenrir, you have Unicorn. Unicorns are very, very cheap right now. I think that card's going to spike very, very hard later on in its life. And then you also have your Shangri-La and your La Birth, all pretty much handed to you very early on. And I'll give a nod here, like the Exceed monsters that you need, like Flare Metal, you know, some Draco Sack. It really depends on what you want to do here, but you know that coming down the pipeline, this deck is going to be this huge counter to a lot of the meta. I think that this deck is pretty crazy for what it aims to do in the meta, and to be honest with you, when you can see this far out here, what cards that you need to pick up so far back, that's such an advantage tree to the average player. Knowledge this far out is quite nice. So do with that what you will. I do think that that's definitely going to be something you want. Next up is going to be the Ishizu cards. Now, the reason why I mention this is if you plan on playing Yu-Gi-Oh! For the next 2 months, if you're planning on playing Tier, you're planning on playing maybe the Naturia deck, if you're planning on playing Runic, this is going to be a set of cards you're going to want. I guarantee you, at some point, they're going to clean these cards up on the ban list, though. So if you have a regional for November/December coming up and you want to pick these up and then turn around and flip them immediately afterwards, I would kind of recommend doing so. This is strictly just on the premise of I want to get in, I want to play, and then I want to get out. If you're planning on holding these, you're like, hey, you know, some of these going to 1 doesn't really hurt me. You know, I'm a traditional collector. I want to have, you know, play sets of everything I think will have some sort of application on the metagame, then that's fine, all right? I think you're good to hold in that case, but do keep in mind that you're probably going to lose some value. I would be very cautious with how much money I pay on this core, though. Circulation is going to bring it down pretty hard, in my opinion. And then last but not least here is going to be Photon Hypernova. This is going to be your Chatri Law set. This set brings in some of the most devastating cards, but it also brings in some pretty interesting little sub-pieces. You have the Plunder Patrol card in here. Is this set going to be as good as Darkwing Blast on the meta? I think it's going to have some interesting application, that's for sure. Once again, I like mentioning these upcoming core sets to kind of give people an idea of why they're picking up cards as a little bit of a plug-in here. So Photon Hypernova is going to have a lot of the stuff here we talked about. That new Talents card is going to be amazing. And to top things off, the rest of your Shangri-La cards, absolutely. So what do you guys think? Please leave a comment below, tell me what you guys think, and I'll see your beautiful faces back here later in the day, guys. Peace out. patrons. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.